It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. We say hello to Paris correspondent Erin Zaleski. How are you?
Oh, I'm well, thanks.
All right, welcome as well to Vivian Walt, contributor to Time Magazine.
Hello.
How are things?
Good.
All right. Mark Dean, Deputy Paris Bureau Chief for Bloomberg News. Nice to see you. And the man who cracks the whip on the second floor here. He's France24.com's, I guess you call it editor-in-chief?
Yeah.
All right, let's say
Say it like you want.
All right. And Sylvain Attal
I'm
is
the boss.
And the boss, all right. The World This Week, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. 1 week to go before a different U.S. president is sworn in, a very different U.S. president.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, not you. Not you. Your organization's terrible. Your organization's terrible. Let's go. Don't be rude. Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question. You are fake news. Go ahead.
All right, CNN, which, by the way, is not fake news, singled out at Donald Trump's first press conference since July. This after reporting on the salacious tales of Moscow's sex tape blackmail and cloak and dagger sit-downs in Prague between key Kremlin operatives and Trump campaign handlers. It was all down to one source, uncorroborated. It was the first time that Trump, in that press conference, at other points, pointed the finger at Moscow for hacking, but grudgingly at times, and spreading the blame with others, most notably when it came to China. What was your reaction, Vivian Walt, when you saw the tone of this press conference, a mix of congeniality and, as we saw, confrontation?
You know, I think more than confrontation with the press is a healthy thing. And perhaps the one good thing to be said about this press conference is that there's no veneer of being cozy with the press or the press being cozy with the president, for that matter. The gloves are really off where they ought to be, actually.
Are the gloves really off? Because this is a man who's been in the entertainment business, and the mix of congeniality, this kind of calling you out.
That's true, but I don't recall any time where there was such a kind of open antagonism towards the press of anybody. President Bush, George W. Bush, who had a very hard time with the press, nonetheless was regarded by the press as being kind of a nice guy. And this is something completely different. And I think what's most scary to people is not that perhaps you don't believe what he believes. That is par for the course in any kind of democracy. I think what's very scary to people is the sort of the tendency towards chaos and the tendency towards the completely unpredictable. And that, I think, leaves people feeling, a lot of people feeling very uneasy about things that could go wrong.
Is the chaos stage managed, or is the chaos just chaos, Erin Zaleski?
I think it's just been chaos.
Really?
We've seen it on the
So you have a literal reading, like Vivian, of what happened at the
Yes,
press
we've seen it on the campaign trail, and now we're seeing it here. There's chaos. He's evading a lot of the questions. He was sort of tap dancing around a lot of the questions when a reporter asked him about releasing his tax returns. He said, no one cares about that, sort of putting words into the mouth of the
But that may have been
people.
one of the strengths of his press conference. He says, hey, people knew I wasn't going to release my tax returns before I was elected, and I still won.
It was an issue during the campaign,
Right.
and he was still elected.
Another thing I noticed is it seems like there might be cracks in the cozy relationship with Russia. This was the first time that I've seen him denounce, maybe not in very strong terms, but say, okay, Russia did the hacking. Then he sort of meandered onto something else, but he did say that Russia was behind it, and Putin was wrong to do that.
Mark Dean, is that your takeaway as well from that press conference?
Well, let's go back to the chaos. I think that the chaos is deliberate, and it's to be distracting, and the attacks on the press are to to decredibilize the press, to decredibilize CNN, so that so that the people who support Trump go, those guys will never support us anyway, on Russia is a separate issue, and it's good that it's getting a lot of attention. I think the line that everyone takes away from that press conference is that, hey, it's an asset if I'm friends with Vladimir Putin. So, yes, he toned it down a bit, but in no way comparable to anything that any other American president would have done.
No American president, no French president either.
Well, maybe it would seem you like advocating the devil, but I think that decredibilizing CNN and, by the way, also BuzzFeed was an easy task, because I think that, unfortunately, fake news is not the privilege of only Donald Trump and his fans. And we can say that, well, for example, if you write that there's a sex tape, for example, showing Donald Trump with prostitutes in Moscow, we want to see it. If you don't see it, it's as you said, it's uncorroborated news. And I think it was wrong for CNN and BuzzFeed to add this on air, obviously. And now it's just like Donald Trump, who was accused of deliberately leaking fake news to the public during the campaign, is turning the weapon against those who accused them and said, "You're fake news." And it was very unfortunate that CNN and BuzzFeed decide to use this news, because other news organizations.
Well, CNN did not.
I mean,
to some point, they did. In French, we say calomnier, calomnier, il en reste toujours quelque chose. Okay, so
Sylvain, your point is right. I mean, BuzzFeed in particular bears a lot of responsibility for bringing up these allegations.
But we also have a responsibility, and CNN has a responsibility. But okay, come on, we all, coming from news organization here, we don't like when a president, for example, has this kind of attitude against journalists. But we have to make abstraction of that.
No, I completely agree.
In this fact, he was right. He was right.
The fact is that CNN didn't do the same thing BuzzFeed did.
Not the same thing.
But it allowed Trump to put them all in the same box. If you looked at the exchange between Kellyanne Conway and Anderson Cooper, it really showed that. And CNN is taking it on the chin here.
But just to step back a little bit, I mean, this is sort of the news of the day. But if we look at the bigger picture, and Aaron was talking about this tap dancing, this is quite a tap dance to maintain for months and years to come. You have a guy who hasn't even taken office yet, who's already alienated the intelligence community, who's fired every single diplomat for the first time in U.S. history. Every single ambassador has to leave. You have powerful enemies here, and sooner or later, his tax returns will be...
There was another surprise on that point, which came while Trump is being vociferous in that press conference at Trump Tower over on Capitol Hill. His nominees for key posts taking aim squarely at Vladimir Putin. His pick, for instance, for Defense Secretary James Mad Dog Mattis, saying that Putin is trying to break NATO.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump's views are very squishy. He doesn't have a very defined set of political ideas the way Barack Obama does. He has very little sense of history. He wanted to win. That was his major motivation. And so he's, either he's going to be persuaded by his secretaries of defense or state or whoever that he needs to modify his views on torture or climate change, whatever, or he will simply dictate to them what he wants them to say and do, and if they don't abide by it, as he puts it, he'll say you're fired, which is one of his favorite phrases.
And well, on that point, then, do we know any more of what his policies will be? And he's now promised an inquiry within 90 days. He said he's buried the hatchet with one of the heads of intelligence with whom he crossed swords earlier in the week. This is a man who knows entertainment. This is all show, and it'll all be different come next Friday.
I still found a lot of what he said, back to tap dancing, it was very ambiguous. He kept repeating himself over and over again, sort of saying the same thing with a slightly different way. When he was talking about the wall with Mexico, for instance, there wasn't anything very, we're going to do it, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to happen within a month. But I mean, then he would kind of divert to another question. The same thing with the Obamacare. It wasn't really clear how that was going to unfold. That he said it would, and it was a disaster, and this needed to happen. But
He's still in the skin of the candidate. He's not. He's not already in the skin of the president. We need time.
No.
I think we need time to.
We'll see whether he really, takes on the skin of the president. I think the thing is, in terms of policy, look, there's one side which is governmental policy, and what you're seeing coming out of the testimony of Tillerson and Mattis is, pretty classical American worldview, and in a sense, that's reassuring. That on the policy front, on stuff that doesn't make it onto primetime TV, things are probably going to continue more or less as we know. But anything that enters into the realm of politics, or anything that wakes up Donald Trump at 4:30 a.m. Because some tin pot dictator has insulted him on Twitter or whatever, that becomes a worry. And there, Donald Trump won't take the time to consider what his Secretary of State has said or advised. He'll just put out a tweet, and as we've seen him moving share prices. Well, it's going to get a lot worse than that.
Speaking about the big picture, maybe it's because I'm a great fan of spy novels, and maybe I'm going too far on that. But after having said that it was probably fake news, but probably not, we don't know actually. Now that it's public, we want to know more about this sex tape. But there's not only this sex tape. There is reason to be worried that a foreign country, Russia, led by a former KGB agent, who's probably acting like he's still a KGB agent, has recruited a guy who's now president-elected of the United States. This is something that can be true, and that no author of spy novels would have dared writing it.
But you believe this, Ivan?
It's a probability.
Really?
I think it's a probability, and maybe because the science of recruiting people is that the people you recruit doesn't even know they're recruited. Donald Trump thinks he's simply a good friend of Vladimir Putin, and probably it's his mistake. Maybe to some point, he has been recruited, and probably it's going to be the biggest story of this mandate. Probably or probably not, but there's a chance that it's true. And if it's true, it's the biggest spies scenario that we've seen. But maybe I'm going too far because maybe I read too much spy novels. That's possible. That's possible.
Well, I mean, I do think that sounds a little bit far-fetched, but nonetheless, I am almost convinced that there is an awful lot still to come out about Donald Trump that we don't know yet, and that there are plenty of people now that he's antagonized and alienated, who ultimately will feel free to leak the information.
But there's subversion part of Vladimir Putin against the United States, and you know what? Maybe we're next on the list. We French.
With the French presidential election. We'll talk about that in part 2 of our discussion. Mark Dean, I want to ask you, because can't help noticing that Canada this week switched foreign ministers, and that's not the only thing that the center-left leader, Justin Trudeau, has done. I see that he's enrolled the services of one of his conservative predecessors, Brian Mulroney, to sort of help get acquainted with Trump.
Well, Mulroney is an ideal person for that, and that's interesting because Mulroney is a conservative who essentially, he didn't run directly against Trudeau's father, but the hate that Pierre Trudeau left in the country when he retired as prime minister in the 1980s, Brian Mulroney surfed that to become the next conservative prime minister for a decade, basically. But
is Canada worried? I guess because if they
ally of the U.S. is worried because they don't know how, whether it be in Europe, Canada, or across Asia, nobody knows how to read what's coming out of Washington. The reliable power, defending the free world coming out of Washington since 1945 is no longer there. And so, you better believe it, Canada is worried. Justin Trudeau is in a pickle, in a sense, because he spoke out against Trump during the election, which was, he shouldn't have done. That's a mistake for any. François Hollande did it too. But, for Canada, is a mouse living next to an elephant. It's very dangerous.
All right, after Obama's multipolar world, The Economist writing, Team Trump is making a bet on assertive nationalism. They have a cartoon that accompany one of their columns this Friday. There you see Obama handling the globe with white gloves while Trump bounces it like a basketball. So there's one view of how the world is going to be seen from Washington after January the 20th. Earlier in the week, Barack Obama's farewell speech took place in Chicago. And on Thursday, the surprise awarding of the Presidential Medal of Freedom to the man in his shadows these past 8 years.
I am pleased to award our nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
I just hope that the asterisk in history that is attached to my name when they talk about this presidency is that I can say I was part of the journey of a remarkable man.
Part of the journey of a remarkable man. And I noticed that, earlier in the week, Vivian, we did a show on Obama's farewell, and the views were extremely polarized. It was some people, the man can do no wrong, and others quite caustic in their criticism. And we think we know what Obama's legacy is going to be, but we don't.
I don't think so. I mean, and I think there's also not just that kind of division, but there's a division between Obama the man and Obama the accomplishments. He's clearly made some serious mistakes during his presidency. Probably very high on the list, if not top of the list, would be Syria. And that is something that's really going to kind of, be left behind as part of his legacy. That said, I think you would find very few people who would not miss the kind of personality that he brought to the presidency, which was really kind of fairly unique in modern times, this kind of quiet dignity, the family, the everything that came along with his presidency.
Decency.
That now we kind of learn to take for granted, but clearly in terms of what comes next is such a stark contrast that it's somewhat kind of it's such a disjuncture in some ways.
All right, Sylvain Attal likes cloak and dagger stories. We have one, and it takes place at Trump Tower. We're going to be talking about it when we come back. You're watching The World This Week.